So for when I'm going to introduce Phyllis, and for instead of clapping, I'm just going to request that people go like this. So it's not traditional for clapping, but this is a nice way to show your appreciation. Phyllis I actually just the last couple of days spending with her, speaking with her, I have to say that she's one of the most amazing, powerful women I've met in a very long time. And I'm really just, I'm falling in love with you, Phyllis. It's just so, you just touched my heart so much. And she's one of the group of amazing women, Pearl being one of them as well, and that were instrumental in starting Standing Rock, getting it going and holding it, helping people learn traditional Lakota ways in the camp, and doing so much behind the scenes. She's also been doing a lot for a very long time, actually her whole life. She's been an activist. She started early on her with the AIM. She co-founded the Women of All Red Nations, which is an arm of the women's arm of AIM, the American Indian Movement. She's the former, she was on the board of trustees for the National Museum of the American Indian in DC, and did a huge amount to make that happen. She's a former tribal member at Standing Rock. She was there in so many of the crucial places, from Alcatraz to DC to Wounded Knee to helping forge relationships with the UN. And she's still going strong. So I'm just incredibly grateful and honored that she's able to be here with us tonight and to share what she's going to share about where Standing Rock is today, and the work that she's doing to that is very, very transition-like. It's all transition. So without further ado, I'm going to put up a picture as a backdrop that I think kind of says it all. And I'd like to invite Phyllis Young.
Good evening. I mentioned earlier, for the record, Chante washte nape chuzape, mini techeowi hemachiapi, na mini yuha najiwi hemachiapi. I want to first of all thank you for inviting me to come to speak at the national meeting of transitions, which is the first time that I, as an Indigenous person, have been invited to participate at the national level. in an American city. I want to also acknowledge my relatives in Mini Sutta. Mini is water. Sutta is hard, or Ota is many. So this is Dakota territory. And I want to acknowledge my ancestors, 38 of them who were hanged in this state by executive order. The largest mass execution of Indian people in this country were part of Ocheti Shakoi. So, and created the clinic that became world renowned, the Mayo Clinic, that did the research on all the bones of the 38 hanged to advance the noble practice of medicine. So even after death and after hanging, my relatives contributed in a good way to this country. So I want to acknowledge them and this place where I came. But I want to start out by saying we have been continuing our life struggle. We have always had partners. We have always had good Americans that have helped us in our struggle. So I never forget. 1985, we founded the Cowboys and Indians Alliance, the CIA, in the Black Hills. We still have that. We renewed our spirit and our partnership once again. So we stand with the Cowboys in Nebraska in treaty territory. We have their backs. So we have been fighting. I want to just, for the record, I'm a former tribal council member, duly elected by our people for 4 years. I have a free spirit that could not sit in a square box on a routine basis. So I didn't run for that office, but I run again, but I do support the democracy and free elections in my homeland. So this is what this is about. This is about redefining our democracy. As Native people, we have fought vigorously and have been vigilant to protect the principles at the highest level. And we said that in the camp. And I will always acknowledge the Americans who stood in the front line for us, with us, and for us. So I thank those of you who are in the front lines, in your front yard and in your backyard, to protect the land and the resources that we need to live as human beings. At Standing Rock, we faced 55 applications for pipelines to cross the river. And we have to stop it. And Dakota Access, being a rogue pipeline that took our name, Dakota, my nationality, for their name, for their pipeline. So that's one lawsuit that we are pursuing for what it's worth in this system of unilateral taking. Of 57 lawsuits that we are pursuing. So since 2007, we have been fighting for pipelines, the Northern Border pipe gas line, the Keystone XL, the Keystone, and Dakota Access. So after 10 years, you get tired of rhetoric and dialogue that is meaningless. So we struggled for those 10 years, and this led to the camp, which is based on traditional law. And we had to go back to the 7 council fires, which is our traditional governance. Ocheti Shakoi predates the Constitution of the United States. It's based on our ancestral and the natural law. So we had to create that camp, and the 7 council fires had not convened for over 150 years. For us, it was very historic. And there were 416 indigenous nations that brought their flags, came to us to support us. We started out with just a camp that we thought we would set up our traditional camp on the river, and our struggle would begin for us. We never envisioned that 13,000 would ultimately come from all over the world to support us. So we didn't have time to organize or to plan or to name you to a different committee. I said earlier, we just had to put on our best human behavior and provide in accordance with our cultural values and system, which is based on necessity. That is the beauty of our culture, is necessity. And that's a message to us as a people, that water is a necessity, most basic. You can't eat the green money, but we need to create green across the land for our food. So that was the result of 10 years, 4 pipelines, and what Dakota Access did was go through the motions of the doctrine of discovery. So for those of you who are not familiar with the history, the doctrine of discovery is 5 papal bulls that was signed for Columbus when he came here, which says that we are wandering beasts, that we are subhuman, that we were never considered a race till we declared it in Geneva at the Human Rights Commission in 1977, that we are the red race of the Western Hemisphere, that we are beautiful human beings, that we demand a seat at the table for all humanity. We had to go through the exercises for ourselves. So those papal bulls were challenging the Pope today to review them and to revoke them, because they are what dictated from the church to the state, which is a violation of the Constitution, to allow slavery, to legalize slavery for Black people and for indigenous people in this hemisphere. So if the Pope today can bring the scientists and the Catholic priests together to review the interference by the church in Galileo's scientific endeavors, in this day and age, we challenge the Holy See to review the doctrine of discovery. And for those of you who believe in the Constitution of this country, there is a small provision in there in a foreign language, and I challenge you, look for it tonight as soon as we leave. That describes what we are, and truthfully what we are not. So when I say ultimately, nothing short of changing the Constitution, to omit that and building walls in this country, tell me about it. The first wall built in America was around Manhattan, so that the Indians would not enter into New York. The first wall, it is now called Wall Street. So when we stay in New York, we'll say, what side of the wall did you stay on? Did you fall off the wall? So wall is common to indigenous people. We were the first ones who had the wall in New York City. So Trump is not a unique thinker to create a wall. Going to use taxpayer money for it, though. So we have been struggling since Columbus arrived here, and nothing short of revoking the doctrine of discovery, because we are a beautiful race of people. We have a beautiful language. We have beautiful spirituality. And our spirituality was banned by government policy for 60 years, from 1910 to 1978. We had to petition the Congress to enact the Indian Religious Freedom Act in 1978. And thank you to the underground and our people who kept the secrets and the language and the mysteries for us to continue. Today, I represent the 1% left. We are the survivors of every atrocity, every massacre, every battle. And we are calling to Americans to stop the wars, because America has no collective memory of peace. We as Native people do not have a collective memory of peace. We have a collective memory of war and trauma. And physiologically, I learned a new word, English. I thought I knew English pretty good, but physiologically, it has affected us. And so it's only been 40 years that we went through our infancy and our adolescence, and now we are full adults spiritually. We took back our spirituality. It's not enough to go to the God box on the corner of the street once a week and say, I'm sorry, and go back and do it again. Our spirituality is every moment, every day. The morning star, the evening star. And so it is a spiritual movement. For me, it was the spiritual base that kept the peace at the camp. We just came from Boston. We got the Disobedience Award from MIT. And I most graciously accepted it because I've been disobedient all my life. And it was finally appropriate. I got an award for that. So I want to say that we are about decolonization. It just means taking away what life he made for us. And that's what your struggle is, but you have a different name for it. And I saw the agenda. I'm supposed to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow, but The camp, we opened it, Stone Camp, April 1st, and by December we had to expand to Ocheti Shakoi, which is Army Corps land, but we still own the mineral rights, and it was originally in our Aboriginal territory, so we moved there because there were so many people who came. So the Veterans for Peace came on December 4th. There were, we kept it at 1,300 because we had to provide space and beds and food for them. We capped it finally at 2,000 veterans. 3,000 came. And when the storms came and hit, we had to provide 5 of our communities to open their buildings to provide space for them. There were additional 2,000 who did not come. There were 16 cities on the waiting list to come. Those 16 cities and those 2,000 veterans didn't come, but they were planning on coming. So we could not provide for the overflow for the people who were coming, and the majority were Americans. So in my twilight years, I have to claim my citizenship as an American. We are dual citizens under the Treaty of 1868. Article 13, we are American citizens tied to the land, but we retain our citizenship as Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota. Our people, the Ocheti Shakoi, the 7 council fires, we have 14 territories in the United States, including 3 or 4 here in Minnesota, and 9 communities in Canada. So when Sitting Bull fled this country, he petitioned for refuge under the Queen of England, which she denied, but he stayed in Canada. So all of those territories and all those communities are who gathered for the first time in 150 years in Standing Rock. In Standing Rock, we are Hunkpapa, Sitting Bull's people. Hunkpapa is the horn of the buffalo. And so we have an obligation to be the vanguard and the protectors of Ocheti Shakoi. And we did that at Standing Rock. We are also Ihunktawa, the people on the edge. So we serve as the ambassadors to the outside world. And we did that at Standing Rock. We had an obligation. But I suppose I should explain the women and the womanhood that we talk about. So we took back our spirituality. And in that, we acknowledge that we are a universal people, that we are a pluralistic society, and that encompasses all. So based on our spirituality, which manifests itself into the humanity, that has to happen before universal standards. So we need to get there. So we took back our spirituality. So the thunder beings, we refer to the thunder beings as the thunder, the lightning, the clouds, the hail, the rain, the wind. They are all what we would call as the greater mysteries, that they're the universal mystery that have the greatest power of all over humanity and the universe. So in this day and age of climate change, we talk about the thunder beings. And those are our ancestors. So we pray to them. And so people, general terminology is bad storm. They're all horrified when storms come. But we prayed to the Oyate, the Wakia Oyate, the thunder beings, during the camp. And that storm that you would know came 6 times. So it created a time when we all had to stop doing what we were doing, regardless of who you were. So the wind is the female. She likes to play. She's mischievous, and she doesn't abide by anybody's rules. And as the female, she's the circle in the hurricane. She's the eye of the storm, the tornado. And we have to acknowledge her because she's the sign of climate change. She's bringing the warning to us that something is unbalanced. So as Pearl always says, and we always talk about, the linear age of man is over. And it's incumbent upon the female to step up, the women, to acknowledge who we are. We didn't have a struggle of suffrage in our community. It was always about our people. But we have defined societies, and I had to step up in 1978 to create the Women of All Red Nations so I could go to the Congress and defy the practice of sterilization against Native people. So I could go and be a voice to a world forum, Free University, and the Bertrand Russell Tribunal to state and defy the practice of sterilization against our people. It was necessary for me to co-found a women's group because no man can talk about the women's issue. So when I see 100 congressmen standing up there and talking about abortion, that's crazy to me, because you have no right to speak about any of us as women. So taking our rightful place and telling our story and our life experience, that I think America is ready. And I know the scientists, when we talk about the energy development, they are excited. And they're ready to come out of the caves and be human beings. So we're all coming to a threshold where we all have the basic necessity of water. So there's stories, all kinds of stories that we can tell. But our struggle at Standing Rock continues. It was the most successful nonviolent protest on our part. In this country. And hopefully it serves as a precedent for all of the hotspots in this country and Canada. We had the Assembly of Nations who came to the Black Hills on the 4th of July to make a commitment to Indigenous people in Canada and the United States together to fight against all the pipelines that were crossing our water lines. So at MIT, which I said is the brass ring of technology in this country, not satisfied there to get a little globe, little award, but we want partnerships. So we're having a Dakota MIT summit with technology, hopefully by October, so we can move aggressively. I continue to say no more oratory, and here I am orating. No more rhetoric, and here I am. And no more crying. The crying, the woundedness of our people is over. We have a plan of action. We are going to do safe alternative energies, hydropower developing on the 7 streams within Standing Rock. We're going to do very controversial energy development, which is coal fusion or LENR, which skeptics say doesn't exist, but why you have a professor, eminent professor at MIT who's teaching it, and military who is using it in Afghanistan to create light for the villages, create light in my community. So we know that we applied for $1 million grant through the federal government, and the cost share was $500,000, which we never have. So it has to come from the private sector. And so I have confidence in America. I have a renewed hope, and I have to claim my dual citizenship. And I have to be in the front lines with everyone else to ensure that we protect the democracy that has built this country. We all know glory days. We all look back and we see how our struggles together, the Vietnam War, all of the struggles in every city, that we prevailed based on our freedom. I was raised on VA pension. My grandfather was a code talker in the First World War. My uncle, my mother's brother, was a hero at Normandy, 24 hours before Normandy. Those were necessary days. So we didn't fight in France so France could be free. That was secondary. My grandfather was a code talker. He used our language to help save America. So we need to be mindful of Russia, because Prussia with a P was obliterated, and those immigrants came to North Dakota. We need to be mindful of what happens in Poland. I like to believe that my grandfather didn't fight as hard as he did and valiantly under a secret code that none of us knew all our lives, because he was so loyal and patriotic to this United States of America. Nobody owes us anything. Nobody owes us anything. We are the landladies and the landlords, and we only want what belongs to us and the revenue derived from our property. We own the dams by construction methodology approved by court. They owe us $4.99 billion for the hydropower on Minnesota. We own the mineral rights. We own the riverbed. Individuals, not the tribal council, individuals. We are suing for what it's worth, and we will not accept any unilateral decision by any court in this country, because we are treaty. And I will always say, if this America is still a republic governed by the Constitution and treaties are the supreme law of the land, we will prevail. So we are moving forward with litigation. As I said, we are suing Tiger Swan, who is the security that brought the dogs and fought us aggressively with war tactics. So I'm number 59 of the litigants against Tiger Swan, who did surveillance over my son coming from Kansas City, bringing the 300 ministers who burned the doctrine of discovery at the camp, and who was called a jihadist. And they have an assassination list who lists Chase Iron Eyes, who is our attorney who ran for Congress, state of North Dakota, who was in the camp and continues to be a leader for our young people, our children. So we have a lawsuit against them, class action. We also have a civil suit that was denied by the district court. It is now in appeals court for the damages that have occurred to our people. Up and down the river, we are the senior rights holder of water rights on the Missouri River, of the whole river system. And under the treaty, we own the Missouri River to the headwaters in Montana, to the tailwaters of Nebraska. We have 33 treaties that begin in 1805 at Port Sandusky, Ohio, to 1868. We have adopted the UN Study on International Treaties, which is our status, and we will be incorporating the 4 provisions, including reparations. So we're $1,200 per Indian since 1848, living and deceased. For the ones who were sent to prison, we have the bad man clause where the federal government is responsible for the wrongdoers. Anyone who has been sent to a private prison or a state prison will be $20,000 per inmate, which is what the federal government gives to the private sector for one prisoner. So we're doing reparations. We filed several lawsuits, and one of them was against Trump for the 8 violations that occurred with that permit. And the court did not allow the lawsuit against Trump, but they did allow it against the Secretary of the Army. So the Dakota Access would have had to be on a national priority list for development, and none of the pipelines were on there. So there are clear violations of the federal system. We are challenging every part of it. When they had the environmental impact statement, the federal process for comments, we had over 500,000 comments for the No DAPL EIS, more in the history of the federal regulatory process in the Federal Register. So we're trying to catalog those and trying to incorporate them into, hopefully the judge will order a new process. So we're preparing all of that documentation. And in addition, the General Accounting Office has responded to 22 congressionals' requests for investigation on DAPL. So that is a review of all the federal agencies who were involved with the DAPL authorization, which is illegal. So we have a congressional investigation that's ongoing that we will be addressing. We have the courts. We're having a Dakota MIT summit at Standing Rock at the college, and we're just trying to firm up a date. We're having a correction. My sister was at Alcatraz. So if you figured some years, I might have been 2 months old. No. So we're having a treaty conference at Alcatraz. We're having a film festival, and we're having a hip-hop caucus concert. So a lot of activity. We're having a treaty conference in Rosebud, which is one of the 7 council fires in August. I get a break from here to there for a little while. And then September 17th is the anniversary of the 1851 treaty. And in April of 18 is the 150th anniversary of the Fort Laramie Treaty. So the International Indian Treaty Council will be hosted by Standing Rock but the conference will be at Fort Laramie, but we are all calling it the Constitutional Treaty Convention. And when you say Constitutional Convention, that means change at every level. So we are declaring the treaties under international law, the Vienna Convention, 60 and 63, that we are legitimate treaties, and we have 33 of them. We're going to enact them. We have purchased and are purchasing machines to create our own IDs, and they will be treaty IDs. Our chairman and LaDonna have already traveled to the United Nations with those IDs. We will be creating hunting licenses, treaty hunting, treaty fishing, and treaty car licenses. So we are going to have our own IDs. We will not have state of North Dakota, South Dakota, maybe Minnesota, Nebraska, Montana, and parts of Canada. So we're moving plan of action to create a better world, and we continue with the lawsuit. We're in discussion with the judge probably till the end of July. Dakota Access has to respond. It's been a difficult year because it's all about environmental law, but they finally got to environmental justice, which is a policy that addresses minorities and people, low-income people. We fit in both of those categories. And so it goes on to the treaty for hunting rights and fishing rights and treaty rights. So that's the dialogue, the discussion, the arguments, the litigation that has to occur before the judge makes his decision. There's other action that has filed an injunction to stop the process and the oil from going forward. At any rate, the treaty, Article 11, Proviso 6 says you must do an assessment. That Dakota Access was supposed to do an assessment before they moved. They didn't do it. So the treaty proviso always also says damages. So we're doing 5 valuations on the damages that have occurred back and forward. So we're pursuing litigation. We're in it right now. And then we also have 650 people, water protectors, who are still in court. Many of them are getting the charges dismissed. One of DAPL Security have abandoned them and come to our side, and they have recanted a lot, and so we'll see. I'm a federal witness in one of the courts, so I can't say more than that, but we're still trying to raise money for the lawyers for those 650 who come from every part of the country, but a lot of them are our own enrolled members and from Ochate Shakoi. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Lilo Wopila.
Thank you, Phyllis. There's so much packed into what she just said, and I just want to encourage everybody to look into a lot of that stuff. It takes a while to understand what's really going on a legal level with the reservation. So I just appreciate everything she's doing. So wait a minute. I don't want that. Sorry about that. So I'm going to introduce the next speaker, who Phyllis asked to join her. She works with her on many things, and they collaborate. And so I was really excited to hear, sort of at the last minute, that Pearl would be joining us, because I actually heard I saw Pearl's videos on YouTube back when I was in Standing Rock, and out of all the many, many, many that I was looking at, I was just really struck by her and her message and her heart. So when I found out that she was going to be joining us, I was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. So Pearl is the wife of Russell Means, who had passed away a couple years ago, 2012, right? She continues his legacy. She's a producer, she's an activist, she's an author. She speaks around the world on matters concerning indigenous issues, human rights, environmentalism. She's Dene for the Navajo Nation. And I don't know if I want to try to say your Lakota name. Maybe I'll just say what it translates loosely to, which is bright light. Should I try it? Or maybe you can say it first when you come up. Okay. As I mentioned, she was the wife of Russell Means, who is one of the co-founders of the American Indian Movement, and a very pioneering activist who did a huge amount for the indigenous people. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and invite Pearl Means up, and when she's finished, we'll have them both here for questions and answers.
Yate. Hello, my relatives, friends, and allies. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you, all of you this evening. I received a call from my sister, Phyllis Young, a couple of nights ago, and she said, I need you, can you be here with us? So I was happy that I was available, and it's always an honor to stand with my sister-in-law, Phyllis Young. As I was flying into your beautiful city yesterday afternoon, I was reminded of my late husband, Russell Means. In 1974, he and Dennis Banks were on trial here in St. Paul for 8 months. It was the leadership trials from Wounded Knee, 1973. Judge Nichols heard the case, and in the end, after 8 months, he reprimanded the government, and he threw the charges out based on fabricated evidence, altered evidence, withholding evidence, coercing witnesses, etc., etc., etc. The American Indian Movement trials were the first to expose the graft and corruption of your government. What followed was then U.S. Senator Frank Church's select committee, Senate Select Committee, to investigate other ongoing graft and corruption within the government. We have a long history, a painful history for both of us, the indigenous peoples and the American people. My sister addressed the basis of this inhumane, racist, unconscionable doctrine of discovery. In order for us to heal, we need to address that. We need to rescind that doctrine so that we can all move together collectively as a human family. There's a lot of unknown about the Indigenous world. My late husband spoke very passionately, very loudly, and very often about these truths, historical truths. And he was considered controversial, a radical, dangerous. Makes me wonder, what's wrong with a society that labels the truth as controversial? Well, here we are in the 21st century. Thanks to our ancestors who are on the forefront of the various struggles that enabled us to be here today. And as my sister mentioned, we are 1% of the population of America today. That's 99% genocide. The renowned late legal scholar Felix Cohen said it best: the American Indian is the miner's canary. And we just witnessed that again at Standing Rock. I want to apologize for the poor streaming of our documentary, The Women at Standing Rock. The End of the Line is the title. I am executive producer on the project. I didn't set out to make a movie, but it found me. My late husband was in the arts, all form of arts. He found great love for moving picture and the stage. And we recognize the power of the media and how it can convey messages and stories, and how we need to get involved as Indigenous peoples in framing the narratives that are coming out, to continue to educate the masses so that we can begin this journey of healing, of reconciliation. We know about you. We know about your history. It was forced upon us. But you know nothing of us as Indigenous peoples. "97% of us come from matrilineal social systems. That is not the flip side to patriarchy. It's a society that's based on balance. We recognize the interconnectedness of all of life. The two-legged, the four-legged, the water, the winged, and those that crawl within our grandmother, the earth. We recognize the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the mineral kingdom. We, the two-legged human, we need all of these to survive, yet they would flourish without man. That is a very simple teaching that puts it into perspective very quickly. In matrilineal societies, we have gender roles. Those gender roles are respect. We know we process different than our male counterpart. We don't try to emulate them. We recognize our differences, and then we can celebrate the differences. That's how you maintain balance. We're in the 21st century, and our grandmother, the earth, is suffering, is struggling, is out of balance because of the two-leggeds. The only life form that has forgotten its original instructions from the Creator. We're at a time that's humbling. We're at a crossroads. If we'll be able to continue with our grandmother as she goes through her cleansing and hopefully rebirthing. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to look within. As Indigenous peoples, we come from oral societies, which forces children at a young age to develop both their imagination, their intellectual mind, and their heart. We connect our heart with our brain. That's balance. Western science talks about the right brain, the left brain, and creates a separation. Intellectually, you can convince yourself of anything. But if you listen to your heart, you're going to know the truth. And that's what the invader cannot control, is what's in your heart. My late husband often said, the first step in freedom is you're free to be responsible. If each one of us takes individual personal responsibility, we know that like attracts like, and here we are today with organizations such as yours. That makes my heart feel warm. Allies that recognize what we've always known. And I thank you for inviting us to the table. As Phyllis indicated, our societies are very inclusive. They include all of our human family. When the invader came to Turtle Island, we reached out. We recognized this is a relative with a different vision. We have a saying with our people. We may not understand your vision, but we respect it. And that's all we've ever asked, is to be respected. And here we are at the 11th hour. And our brothers and sisters are finally looking to us and saying, what is it you primitives were talking about? One of the last things Russell said to me was, "Hun, this is your time. This is the time of the women." Many of our stories, our prophecies, speak of this time. We call it the time of the female. And what that represents is a heightened, refined energy, one that resonates with love, compassion, nurturing, respect. So we're in a new time, and we have beautiful opportunities to embrace. We reach out to you as allies, and we welcome you in our homelands so that we might move together as the Creator intended. I thank you for your hearts, your spirit, the good words we've heard at your workshop. We look forward to furthering the relationships. Thank you. Mitakyo asen. We're all related.
So we're going to do questions and answers now. Anybody like to ask either Phyllis or Pearl a question? Or have any comments? And I see one in the back.
The question is, when is the film going to be released? Our filmmaker is in Europe this week. We are needing to raise the funds for the editing. It's called post-production. So we're hoping to secure those funds, and unfortunately, anything to do with the indigenous world, American Indian issues, we can't seem to find partnerships in America. So we have a Canadian producer that we're in communication with, and we have a European potential partner. So what we're hoping for is to have a release date around the first of the year. It'll either be a 52-minute documentary or a 90-minute, just depending on the distribution partnership we arrive at.
We are in an election for the chairman, the vice chair, the secretary, and 8 communities. So out of 17 seats, 11 up for re-election. So that's the primary that was just completed on the 19th, and the general election will be on the in September. So we're pretty much in a state of who we're going to elect or re-elect for those communities and the administration. So that's the big issue at home. And but a little bit about Standing Rock. It is the homeland of Sitting Bull. It was the last reservation to be created after 1876, the Battle of Little Bighorn. So we have 8 communities, 4 of which are on the Missouri River. We have 107 miles of shoreline, We are connected to Cheyenne River, who has over 200 miles. So our land base is 2.3 million acres, and our population that resides there is close to 9,000, and the off reservation is also 9,000. So we're close to 18,000 total population for ours, our homeland, Standing Rock. We're 4 bands of Ocheti Shakoi. We are Hunkpapa, Ihunktua, Ihunktuana, and we're Blackfoot. So we have those bands who reside, and we have 11 schools. Standing Rock have had high priority on education. So they have invested. We have been historically a very poor tribe, and our people have invested $1 million in education since 1960. Right now it's 1.5 million. We support college education, graduate. We have doctors and lawyers. We have Princeton grad, Harvard grad, all of the Ivy League schools. Education has been primary. We have a education code, and we're now talking about changing the status of or the objective of careers and getting your education, but we're also teaching cultural competency, and the state of North Dakota has embraced that objective so that teachers will follow the state of Montana to incorporate the tribal histories and the language and have standards for the Indian venue that they're creating in education throughout. So we have teachers. We have at Standing Rock today. We are in court. We are in federal district court in Washington, D.C. to determine the treaty rights, hunting rights, fishing rights, and treaty rights. We're back and forth right now for the month of June and July. We don't know what the outcome will be. It has been totally against us up until now. They were forced to stop because of the environmental justice that we talked about. We are facing the cuts from the federal government. We have over 400 programs funded by the federal government and federal contracts. We're trying to get off of that system where we don't have to go stand in line for appropriations in Congress. We want the revenue from all of our properties on the river and the land, so we're going in that direction. So right now, I think all of Indian country understands the stalemate that occurs when there's elections coming up. We have young, promising men and women who are, freedom is in our DNA. So we used to call it fighters, but that was when you had the rhetoric of the male, we'll fight to the death and we'll kill somebody. But the women, it's about life, and so our rallying cry is we want to live. So we'll see in September. At any rate, all of the objectives that have been created in energy, hydropower, all of the development that has occurred since Standing Rock, since the camps have closed. We are moving aggressively. As I said, in September we'll have a water summit In October, we'll have possibly the Dakota MIT Summit on technology. We're looking at the 3D printer to build homes. We're looking at co-fusion, all of it. So we're creating partnerships across the land, and we welcomed everyone who could offer something constructively to be a part of our partnerships. So we're moving forward in the courts, and we're working hard on responding to the GAO investigation of all the federal agencies and what their responses were regarding DAPL. So that's a big document that we're going to have to put together to address the Congress and the different committees that will be addressing the GAO report request. So a lot of paperwork, a lot of energy that we have to. We have a college, we have Sitting Bull College, and so we're still in poverty. We're facing the cuts of food stamps, the elderly meals. A lot of our budget has been cut. So the casinos are no longer as prosperous, and it's all based on the economy of this country. And we are preparing for food security, trying to build, for 6 years I know I have 8 gardens around my area, my home, and it's my daughters all experimenting on what plants to grow, and they've been testing the different corn, the traditional corn, the old non-hybrid corn. So we're making efforts on growing our own food, having gardens. Cannonball School has a garden for about 4 years now, and so there's some innovative things happening. There's an organized youth council. The vice chair of the youth council just left to visit Portugal with her mother. Our children, our people have been invited all over the country, all over the world. So we have delegations leaving for Norway, Switzerland, Finland, South Africa, places all over the world. So our people are traveling, but we're creating ambassadors so that they can tell the story and share and create partnerships throughout the world on what we can do in unity for the betterment of all of our people. Thank you.
I just quickly, if I may, I don't have a question. We just have time for one more question. But I just want to, I think, behalf of everyone, just say much gratitude for being here and sharing of your wisdom and your deep lineage. And I think folks here are wanting to evolve and learn to do things in a good way, and recognize that we all have a lot to learn, even within the environmental social justice movement, that we need to do work to decolonize this movement in many ways, decolonize the way that we're living. So to that end, we are having a conversation, a continuation of this conversation tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. In the adjacent building in Markham Hall. So if folks are interested to kind of continue the conversation then, I definitely invite that. But in the meantime, we have time for one more question, and I can give this mic to whoever's got the question. So whoever feels it deeply. Oh, all right.
Yes, thank you to both of you for being here with us, for coming here. I was wondering, knowing what you know about what we're doing here in the transition movement, what is your perspective on this work that the folks that are here are engaged with, and what advice might you have for us?
I love it, and I applaud you for it, and it's about time. My advice is start with yourself, your family, your extended family, your community, and it grows from there. If you keep it with just yourself, you're not only forced to look at what's in your own backyard, but it keeps it from becoming overwhelming. Like attracts like, and the movement will just continue to grow, and you'll have like-minded people join in with you. So stay close to your heart. It's not what do I think, it's how do I feel.
I'll just add by saying that America needs a methodology to protect not only your backyard, but your front yard. And so at Standing Rock, we created the Social Impact Assessment, the SIA, which is something they almost created when the Exxon Valdez happened in the Tlingit village in Alaska. They almost mandated that you have to have this requirement in order to have development. So at Standing Rock, we adopted the Social Impact Assessment, adding to the treaty provision of assessment, putting in front of their social impact. So I believe that that's one of the legislative things that we could do across America is create a social impact assessment, a methodology that would stop pipelines, and they would have to be told by you what those social impacts mean. So it's about human life and clean drinking water. So that's my advice to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for all your prayers for the water. And thank you so much, Pearl and Phyllis. So, with the invite whoever brought water to the table to bring it back, and if anybody wants to say a prayer over the water in the bowl, and with it, please feel free. But that concludes our evening, and please join us tomorrow for the deeper conversation about decolonizing. Good night.